Change doesn't happen overnight, but there's a point where you reach where you become a different person. It's like as if you have moved from being what you are before to what you are now. This point, the transition point where this change happens, is sometimes called the tipping point, which is the name of the book that I recently read by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point. Hi, my name is Kumail. I'm an accountant by day and an avid reader by night. And in these videos, I like to explain and synthesize what I've learned in a way that makes sense. So going back to the book that I read, The Tipping Point, let me just give a brief description of what the tipping point is all about. So a personal example, 2 years ago, I started running. Now, when I started running, I was only running once a week, and I did not call myself a runner. 2 years down the line, I have now run a marathon. I've run 5 half marathons, and I'm due to run my second marathon. And I have got some of my medals here to prove that. But there was a point where, from the point I started running to the point where I now call myself a runner, there was a point where I had done enough runs where the tipping point happened that I became a runner. I identified myself a runner. And this is what is called a tipping point, or what Malcolm Gladwell defines as a tipping point. It's like the point where a transition suddenly happens, but actually it didn't happen overnight. So you think of a fire that spreads through the forest. So you have the fire that's spreading, but it's just a fire. But then suddenly it just spreads so widely that it becomes a forest fire. But there's a transition that happens between when the fire was just a small fire to when it becomes a forest fire. Or like the COVID-19 pandemic, something that we just recently witnessed in the last few years. Certain people got infected, and over time, the more people that got infected, it tipped the scales to become an epidemic. But it didn't become an epidemic overnight. It built up gradually and slowly until the epidemic happens. And that's what happens in our personal lives too. When you talk about small changes can trigger big results. And that's the whole point. Small changes trigger big results. If you've read the book by James Clear, it's all about the small actions, the habits that over time would stack up and make you the person that you want to become, that you need to become. And so when you have ideas and you have visions and you have thought processes that spread around, they spread around over a certain amount of time. So for example, communism wasn't just established overnight. It was an idea that spread through slowly and surely that created this whole phenomena called communism. Now, when I read this book, and the subtitle of the book says, How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference, I learned a few lessons, and I'd like to share 3 of the lessons that I learned from this book by Malcolm Gladwell. He's got another book called Outliers, which is also very interesting, where he talks about the rule of 10,000, where you have to do something for 10,000 hours to be able to become better. But this is another book that I would highly recommend reading, and I think it's something that I learned a lot, and I've taken a lot from this book. So, the first lesson I learned was the rule of the few. Well, what do I mean? So, Malcolm Gladwell talks about how there are few people who can trigger massive changes. He identifies 3 types of people. I'll try and use an example to make it easier to understand. But the 3 types of people he identifies are a connector, a maven, and a salesman. Now, just to make it easier to understand, let me use an example. Let's say I want to open a coffee shop. Now, I've got a coffee shop in Baker Street. That I want to open up in London, and I need to start establishing the coffee shop so it becomes a thriving coffee shop. What do I do? So first he says, look for connectors, people who know so many people. So if you have someone who's well connected in the coffee industry, you speak to that connector who will help you influence your idea that you're starting a coffee shop, so you get to know more people in the industry, and they will help you. They will try and pitch for you. They will try and show you the best ways to source your raw materials, whatever, etc. So that's your connector. And then you have the maven. The maven is a person who loves looking at data and analyzing data. So the maven for you would be a person who looks at all the different types of coffee beans, and he will tell you which is the best coffee bean to invest in, because that will allow you to give the best return based on the price you pay, how easy it is to transport it, etc. So that's the maven. And the third person is a salesman. The salesman is a powerful and persuasive communicator. So for example, you have a TikTok influencer and you tell him about your coffee shop, and he basically makes a reel about your coffee shop, or he visits your coffee shop and makes a reel, and that spreads through like wildfire over social media, and that's how you get connected. So it's the rule of the few. So sometimes in life, you might be working really hard, but when you come in contact with certain people, they will just ignite something like a forest fire that will cause you to, might look like overnight multiplication, but actually it obviously happens over time for you to get to know these people, etc. So that's the first lesson I learned, was the rule of the few. The second lesson I learned is called the stickiness factor. And this is actually one of the chapters that he, in his book, in chapter 2 or 3, I believe. Let's have a look. Yeah, chapter 3, the stickiness factor. And he gives so many examples of the stickiness factor. And I think this is probably the most important lesson. The stickiness factor, for me at least, the stickiness factor is basically something that sticks. For an idea to spread, it has to stick in a certain way. It has to be etched in space and time. And you can create this stickiness factor using a different array of things like storytelling, inspirational, personal anecdotes, or saying something in a way that people can relate to. I can give you an example. So I live in the UK, and one of the strongest campaigns in the last decade that we've had in the UK is the Brexit campaign. Now, I'm not sharing any of my political views on Brexit. It's past anyways. But the campaign that happened during Brexit was a phenomenal campaign in terms of it was such a sticky campaign. The motto of the campaign is something that people in my generation will remember for the rest of their lives. The motto was "Take back control," and the whole idea was the EU is basically sucking the money of the UK government, of the British people, and the NHS is having to fund into that, and they would save 350 million pounds. I believe that's what the slogan that was going around at that point in time. Not sure whether it's true or not. I'm not debating about that, but all I'm saying is they use this take back control, this slogan of take back control, to basically create a stickiness factor. And whenever you think of Brexit, you think of take back control. And that is why the UK, the Prime Minister at that point in time David Cameron, did not want to leave the EU. He did not want Brexit to happen. But because of the stickiness factor of the other side, that happened. People voted to leave the EU. And that's because of the stickiness factor. It just sticks. And if you find an idea, or if you find something that starts to stick, then you will do really well. And that's where the tipping point happens, when it starts sticking. Let me give another example. So many years ago, maybe like, I can't remember exactly, probably 5-10 years ago, there was this whole ice bucket challenge. Now, the ice bucket challenge only started off as a way to spread information and sympathy for ALS. People are suffering with ALS, and people just started doing, one person started doing the ice bucket challenge. But then it became such a widespread phenomena that celebrities and people in high positions started doing the ice bucket challenge. But that's because it's stuck. This is the stickiness factor. When you find that thing that sticks, it will cause you to tip over, and it's phenomenal how it just causes changes overnight. But of course it didn't happen overnight. Someone had to take the effort, try to think of what to do it himself, and then over time it spreads. But sometimes it spreads faster than other times. But that's called the stickiness factor. And I think that, to me, was the most powerful lesson from this book. And the third lesson that I learned was the power of context. And the power of context is another important lesson I learned, where basically if you struggle to change people, or you struggle to change behaviors or conditions, then it might be better or easier to change the environment, because that might lead to the tipping point. So once you change the environment, that tips your odds in favor of something. Let me give you a personal example. So when I was younger, I used to love chocolates, crisps. I was obsessed with them, and they were always available. But then there reaches a point when you think to yourself, you need to be healthier. But if they're always available, I mean, it's so easy to go to the kitchen counter, look at the chocolates there, and just eat one. And this happens at work as well. You have biscuits at work, and you have crisps, whatever, at work. But if the biscuits or the crisps or the chocolates are now put in the pantry or in a cupboard or in a drawer somewhere else, and instead there's a basket of fruits at the top, then you have to work a bit harder to open the drawer, take out the chocolate and then eat it. Whereas the fruit is right there. So if you're just passing by the kitchen or passing by the work cafeteria or wherever it is, you just pick up an apple and go, right? So you make the environment easier or more conducive to what you want to do to encourage you to become that. Now, like I said, another personal example that I'd like to give is I started running recently, and I want to run more and more. I mean, I ran a marathon in London and I found it very, very hard, and I think it was a big challenge. And now I want to help me to help myself. It sounds a bit convoluted, but I want to help myself by doing something to encourage me to run, and which is why I actually have this medal rack in the corner. It wasn't just for show, it was for me to encourage me, to show me what's possible if I keep on running. So the more I run, the more medals I get, the more the sense of achievement that I feel that I have done something and that I am becoming a runner, becoming a better person for myself. I don't need to prove to anyone else that I am a runner or I'm running marathons. It's just for myself. But this helps me to and inspires me to keep on running, to keep on doing what I'm doing, to keep on grinding through the struggle. Marathon training is really hard. It's 16 weeks of intense struggle. But you know, this really helps. Knowing that this is there to inspire me, to motivate me, to help me, means I can keep on doing the runs, showing up every single day or whenever I need to show up 3 times a week, and doing the runs to become a better runner so that I can get more medals for myself, like I said. And it's not meant to be chasing it for anyone else or to show off. It's just meant for myself. So I think this book, The Tipping Factor, Malcolm Gladwell, I think it's a really cool book. I learned a lot. I definitely had a lot to think about in terms of my own life and my own personal journey in life to be able to change, because I went through a phase where I started procrastinating and not doing the things that I wanted to do. But then suddenly over time, I started implementing small habits and they reached a tipping point where I started becoming the person I wanted to become. For example, the runner that I wanted to become, or the reader that I wanted to become. But it didn't happen overnight. It happens through a tipping point. But sometimes things get faster. You become better at what you're doing. And I think when you find those people, you find the environment, you find those things or the stickiness, things that stick, then you can do much better than where you are. So I hope I have inspired you to read this book, a phenomenal book, a book that I think I would definitely recommend reading, and something that I would want to come back to at another point in time. Obviously, I'll be at a different journey in my life, and it's something that I would want to implement further to see how much better I can become. And I think for me personally, there isn't just one tipping point. There are multiple tipping points in your life. So there might be one tipping point here where you go from person A to become person B, and then from person B there'll be another tipping point to become person C, because life is a journey. It's a lifelong journey. It is one that you are constantly discovering and improving and investigating yourself and learning more and more about yourself. But the whole point is you need to be curious. You need to keep on learning and keep on going. And that is what I've got from this book. I want to keep on learning, I want to keep on journeying, and I want to keep on going as much as I can, for as long as I have life and as long as I have breath in this world, to do what I'm doing. So that's it from me. I hope I have encouraged you to pick up this book, The Tipping Point. I think it's a book that would possibly change your life, and the way you see how ideas are spread, how you become better with doing what you're doing and keeping on improving as a person, the person you are, and just becoming a better person essentially. So yeah, that's it for me for this week. Until next time, see you soon.